ArcelorMittal can finally take control of SR-Steel's Hazira plant. The world's largest steelmaker has been at it for years now, amending its bid, paying off Uttam Galva's lenders and facing a series of legal cases. And its entry will change the dynamics within the Indian steel sector in arguably more ways than one. Lakshmi Mittal and his team have a reputation of turning sick facilities profitable, has the financial wherewithal to wait it out in the interim as well. So what does it do to the Indian landscape? Let's get in somebody who looks at this very, very closely. Rakesh Arora, Go India Advisors. In a manner of speaking, our go-to person whenever such big announcements come in. Rakesh, good having you. Thanks so much for joining in. Neeraj here, good morning. Your prima facie assessment, Rakesh, of what does this do to the steel space in India?
Well, see, Indian steel space was dominated by only two players, JSW Steel and Tata Steel. And Tata Steel also was little bit, I would say, focused on Europe in the last 6-7 years, and that allowed JSW Steel to grow really fast. However, now Tata Steel is focusing back on India, and now ArcelorMittal has come back with a big chunk of 10 million ton capacity. So I think it's become much more, a three-pronged race. And which is good for the Indian steel consumers because there will be enough competition and there will be enough supply coming in on board. So I would say good times for steel consumers.
Good time for steel consumers. What does it do to the players? And we'll probably make our viewers hear something that Sajjan Jindal had to say a bit later on. But I remember in an interaction with Menka at Davos, Sajjan was pretty upfront about how it will benefit the incumbents, Rakesh, if indeed ArcelorMittal doesn't make an entry. Now he has made an entry. What happens to that space then?
So what happens is that, see, you have a very strong, financially very strong player and who is focused to grow. So he's not going to really stop at 10 million ton capacity that he has acquired. Already, they've made, hints that they'll increase this 10 million to 15 million ton. And also over the weekend, there are news about, putting a plant in East India where a lot of iron ore mine auctions are happening. So I think you will have a very aggressive player who would be determined to increase his presence and market share. And to that extent, it doesn't really augur too well for the incumbents JSW and Tata Steel because they will face increasing competition. Secondly, the big chunk of profitability used to come from auto steel, which is where I think ArcelorMittal, with its joint venture with Nippon, can really hurt the incumbents. So both aggression and in high-end products is where the incumbents will face a lot of competition, and to that extent, that's why I said steel consumers would be very happy with this.
Rakesh, we're just looking at the Hazira plant and the location thereof vis-a-vis what the incumbents have. So in terms of areas that they can, and I know companies can transport commodities in a meaningful way, but I'm just looking at purely the production facilities. ArcelorMittal doesn't have too much of competition in the area that it is, at least the plant is located. My question to you is, some point of time JSW Steel had mentioned to us, Sheshagiri Rao I think had mentioned that ArcelorMittal can't do a geo to an Indian steel industry. I don't think we're talking about statistics that stark, but at a point of time when everybody was hoping for some recovery in the markets, etc., over a slightly medium-term market, over a slightly medium-term period, does this put a spanner in the works for profitable expansion plans that both JSW and Tata Steel had for themselves?
So first of all, Indian steel industry is very small and is part of a global steel industry. So unlike a telecom provider where things are confined to a geography, steel can actually really travel very far. And the ArcelorMittal assets in Hazira are very well placed because they are port based, so they can ship their product to anywhere in the country at a very economical freight cost. Number two is that they are very near to the auto hub. So basically India's auto hubs are Pune or Aurangabad or Chennai or Gujarat, and Hazira is very well placed to service those kind of auto hubs. And finally, having said that, all the three companies have their, I would say, they will be forced to actually expand because all the three have actually bid for assets at a reasonably high valuation. And to make them profitable, they have to increase capacity through brownfield expansion or debottlenecking. So when ArcelorMittal is talking about taking SR steel capacity from 10 to 15, the logic behind is to reduce the capital cost. Same is the case with Tata Steel's Bhushan acquisition or JSW's acquisition of Monnet Ispat. They all have to really improve and increase the productivity of the asset that they've recently bought. So I don't think they can shy away from investments, which means that there would be an oversupply situation in India for some time. But fortunately, India doesn't really decide the steel pricing. It is decided by China, which is the major player with 50% market share. So India is a price taker, but the domestic premium is going to be lower when there's an oversupply here.
That was going to be my next question with regards to the supply and demand dynamics. Now with the fact that you're saying that the other players also will have to start looking at expanding capacity, that could mean, do you see that going up to levels where you actually see a glut? Or the fact that this could be something that comes on stream a few years down the line and things could start improving materially from there on? Because right now the industrial steel segment is suffering. There's not much demand that's taking place either from the automotive space or, for that matter, construction and infrastructure where the demand comes in from. So that's a bit sluggish at this point.
Yeah, so demand has been pretty weak, and so if you look at current steel pricing in India, it actually last month went down below the the import duty pricing, where the import duties kick in. So actually the prices was lower than what we thought it could actually go. So there's already a a demand shock which India is going through, and looking at the GDP forecast for the second half. When everybody is talking about a sub 5% GDP print in Q3, the recovery is going to be slightly muted, and it can take longer for demand to really come back. So domestically, I don't think there's too much of green shoots for demand to pick up in the near term. All eyes are on China actually, because China can swing the market quite dramatically, and I think globally next few months look still okay, because one, China is going into that winter season cuts, so their production would be lower. Number two is that we're expecting the trade war to see at least conclusion of phase one, which could be sentimentally positive. And number three is that there would be some restocking demand from China pre Chinese New Year. So all these things factor. Maybe there would be a little bit uptick in the international market, which will support domestic steel companies. But beyond that, we'll have to look for Indian demand recovering to really absorb this increased supply which will come through.
I'm not giving you a time frame, because I leave it to your discretion as to what would be the apt time frame once ArcelorMittal comes into action. With regards to the listed metal companies, listed steel space, which company do you feel is most capable of going head on with ArcelorMittal, or probably sharing that space with ArcelorMittal?
We'll see. As I said, it's a three-pronged race. It's between Tata Steel, JSW, and ArcelorMittal now, and everybody is operating in the same space. So the impact is going to be equally out there. It's not that one company gets more impacted than others.
Rakesh, final question then. I remember a conversation that we had maybe 4 or 5 or 6 months ago. Don't quite remember the exact timeline, but wherein you had mentioned that the valuations of some of the steel companies price in some of the tough times. Now, from there, the stocks have moved up marginally, nothing too dramatic. But this changes the equation a bit. Would you still believe that there is merit in trying and owning some of the steel names in India, or would you wait and watch now?
So I think the commodity stocks have actually come off between 10 to 20% since we last spoke. So from say Tata Steel is trading up from 0.9 6, price to book to 0.65. So not much change. So assuming that global demand remains where it is, maybe the stocks may not have too much of downside. But will they recover in a hurry is the question that we are discussing. And I think next 2-3 months are favorably poised because, as I said, hopefully the trade war phase 1 settlement should happen. And number 2, there would be some restocking demand from China pre-Chinese New Year, which is on 24th January onwards. So these two things give me a sense that probably the rally that we have seen, the slow rally, might continue for another 1 or 2 months. And ArcelorMittal is a long-term impact. It doesn't impact anything in near term.
Yeah. Okay, not in the near term, but maybe in the long term, so can't take a call on that front. Great. Rakesh, so good for you to join in and give us some clarity on what you think this entry means for the steel space over the long term. Really appreciate your time.